Today was the day that the House Ethics Committee was reportedly set to vote to release its report on former Florida Congressman and Trump's new pick for Attorney General, Republican Matt Gaetz. For years now, the Ethics Committee has been investigating a string of allegations against Gaetz, the most serious being the allegation that he engaged in sexual misconduct with a 17-year-old girl, potentially violating sex trafficking laws. Gaetz denies these allegations, but this week, just hours after being chosen by Trump for Attorney General and just days before the Ethics Committee was set to potentially release its report, Gaetz resigned from Congress. And now Gaetz's Republican colleagues are saying that by resigning, Gaetz is no longer under the Ethics Committee's jurisdiction. And so its report, and whatever is in its report, should not see the light of day. It is all a very convenient series of events and excuses. However, the House Ethics Committee has released reports on lawmakers after they have resigned multiple times in the past. Precedent is not in Matt Gaetz's favor. But Republicans control the House, and so what this really is here is a test of party, not precedent.
As far as the timing of a release or report or something, I don't know. The Speaker of the House is not involved in that, can't be involved in that. So I'm not really the person probably to answer that question.
Now, that was the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, on Wednesday, the day that Matt Gaetz resigned. Johnson's stance then was that as the Speaker of the House, he is not involved in Ethics Committee matters like this one. In fact, he cannot be involved. That was Mike Johnson's take on the matter Wednesday. And this is Mike Johnson's take on the matter today.
I believe it is very important to maintain the House's tradition of not issuing ethics reports on people who are no longer members of Congress. I think it would open a Pandora's box. I think it's a very important rule that should be maintained. If it's been broken once or twice, it should not have been, because that would be a Pandora's box.
Yes, the classic Pandora's box, a box that you can open several times without incident, but if you open it again, be careful. Or maybe don't be careful. Who can know? Not only is what Speaker Johnson describing here not a Pandora's box, it is also a full 180 degrees from his stance 2 days ago that he would not get involved in this issue at all. When asked today by the Washington Post if he would do anything to prevent the ethics report from being released, Johnson responded, "I'm going to request that it not be." That is pretty involved, if you ask me. So what changed? What did Mike Johnson do between Wednesday and today? Well, I want you to take a listen to Johnson's answer after his whole Pandora's box spiel.
It's a very important rule that should be maintained. If it's been broken once or twice, it should not have been, because that would be a Pandora's box. I think it's a very important tradition to maintain.
Did you talk to Trump about this?
I'm not talking to anybody about what I've said to Trump.
Yes, there we go. Last night, Mike Johnson spent the evening with Donald Trump at a gala down at Mar-a-Lago. Speaker Johnson doesn't want to talk about what he and Trump discussed, but somehow in the past 48 hours, Mike Johnson's stance on whether or not, as Speaker of the House, he should try and stop the ethics report about Matt Gaetz from being released. Somehow, in the past 48 hours, Mike Johnson's stance on that issue has completely reversed. I wonder how that happened. Donald Trump has picked the most radical group of potential cabinet members in American history. Fox News host Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary, vaccine skeptic and conspiracy theorist Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services Secretary, Tulsi Gabbard to head the nation's intelligence agencies, Matt Gaetz to run the Justice Department. It is truly an unbelievable group of nominees. And the question now is, will any Senate Republicans stand up to block their confirmation? It would only take 4 Senate Republicans, any 4, to block any nominee. Now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that Republicans in the Senate see Matt Gaetz's nomination in particular as doomed. People familiar with discussions among Senate Republicans said that far more than 3 of them are prepared to vote no. Other estimates ranged from more than a dozen Republican no votes to more than 30. It won't even be close, another person told the Journal. That might be true. Or that might just be how Republicans in the Senate feel today. Who can say how they might feel a few weeks from now? How much are Republicans in the Senate underestimating the weight of Donald Trump's thumb on the scale here? Mike Johnson wanted no part in the Gates Ethics Committee report Michigas 2 days ago. And now he's leading the campaign to make sure it never sees the light of day. As one House Republican told the Washington Post today, it's a given. Trump's going to beat us into submission. Trump has already even floated a backup plan, a plan for how he could still get the Senate to allow him whomever he wants in his cabinet, even if he doesn't have the votes. Recess appointments. Essentially, Trump would just tell the Senate to take an extended vacation, allowing him to bypass the confirmation process on the premise that the Senate is out of town. And according to the incoming Republican Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, that option is very much alive.
So you've said that you would do recess appointments if it came to that. What's the threshold for getting to that point for recess appointments?
Well, what I said is, Brett, and I think this is that all options are on the table, including recess appointments. Hopefully it doesn't get to that, but we'll find out fairly quickly.
All options are on the table. We are now facing the first real test of the Republican Party. We might even be gearing up for a low-key constitutional crisis. Congress, after all, is supposed to be an independent and co-equal branch of government. The legislative branch is supposed to check the power of the executive branch. But now, Donald Trump is looking at these Republican senators and saying, jump. And the question is, will they respond? How high?
There's no question he's a leader of our party. That means a leadership. If Donald Trump says jump 3 feet high and scratch your head, we all jump 3 feet high and scratch our heads. That's it.